So welcome to the LTVC Library Teen Virtual Convention Hauntings at the Library. To the board game design panel, we are so excited to have Joseph from Binary Cocoa and Brian also from Binary Cocoa, I believe, and Scott Almes. I'm not sure which company you're from, but um, we're excited to have you with us as well. So I'll let you guys give your introduction. I'm just so excited. We're so excited to learn what you guys have.
Okay, well,
Coco,
Scott, you want to go first?
We can go alphabetical order. Alms. We'll go first. So, my name's Scott Alms. So I'm a freelance board game designer. So work with many different companies around the world to design board games. My best known games are the Tiny Epic series, which is one of those. Also known for a card series called Claim, which is one of those. This is the Italian version, actually, as well as a series of wallet games called the Simply Solo series, and a couple more out as well. But yeah, been designing since 2009 is whenever I signed my first game, Merchandise, and that came out at the following Gen Con. And have had 70 different games released in 14 different languages, and I'm just super excited to chat and learn and talk about games today.
Very cool.
Okay, who's next?
I guess I'll go next. I'm Joseph with Binary Cocoa. We've been making games for a while. Started out as kind of a hobby, and then it's just kind of growing. And now Brian, who kind of inspired me way back in the day when I had hair. Brian has been making games for quite a while, and we decided we should actually try to do something with them. And so that's kind of where Binary Cocoa came into things. Binary Cocoa has existed for a few years now, in some capacity or another, and we've just started getting serious about making some games. We've published a handful, done a few things on Kickstarter and whatnot, and then most of our focus has been on abstract games, but we're starting to move into more narrative-driven type games and whatnot. So that's me. And then Brian, you want to finish us off here?
But I'm Brian Grigsby. I've been doing this since I was a kid. I remember back in the day, with my friends, we used to play Richthofen's War. I don't know if you're familiar with that. The war games with the hexagons, and we would create our own games, make our own boards, and I've kind of done on and off as a kid, but it wasn't until I got together with Joseph that I started, and said, hey, why don't we actually, produce these games? So we have so many games that it's going to take us years to get through just to produce them. But like Joseph said, a lot of them are abstract games, and we're now getting more theme-oriented. Some co-op games, bigger, more games that require more people to play, and that's been fun. So lots of ideas. It's just taken a while to produce the game. So that's me.
Alrighty, that is so cool. So what? I guess I'll kind of start off with the first kind of question. What got you guys starting to make the games, or like how did you figure out that you could make a game? Like what? Because or I don't know how to word it, but because games have been a thing. Like, was there a moment that you were like, yes, this is what I want to do. I want to make games. I guess that's my question.
You know what? I'll go ahead. I'll start that one. When I was in college, I had an instructor that was a math teacher for teachers, and he just got me so excited. I mean, I don't know what it was. It was the most creative class, math class, and that was, I just started in the time that I met him, I probably had 2 or 3 games that I created, and then I was doing tessellations, and so it just somebody like that, just got me excited, about creating. I mean, I've always enjoyed creating, whether it's art or even just anything that you can make up. And games were an easy thing for me to do. I could, I remember just drawing on a piece of paper and using those little ginger bear cookies, to one of the games that called, well, now it's called Frog Chess, but that was kind of just abstract. So that was me, one of my ideas.
Yeah, I'll go next. For me, it was I always really enjoyed gaming. I really enjoyed um, just the whole process of gaming, the social aspect, and the stretching my strategic mind. I played a lot of chess and such as a child, and then as I started to mature and get into some other varieties of games and explore these other genres of games, I I was always thinking to myself, well, I wish there was a game that was like whatever. Um, I wish there was a game about whatever idea, um, and then I realized this was about when I was probably 13 or 14. I realized if I wanted to have a game like that, I could make a game, right? And I know it sounds obvious, if you want something and you can create it, go ahead and do it, right? But when it clicked for me that I could actually do that, and then I started kicking around different game ideas and whatnot, and it just kind of organically grew from there. But I always have a lot of fun seeing people kind of come together and seeing people resonate as a group when they're playing a game. And it's kind of turned into my main motivation now, is just seeing people enjoy themselves. It's kind of been our focus to bring people together through games. And I always say this jokingly. It's kind of become my company's unwritten motto, which is, if you're going to ruin a friendship, do it face to face. We like bringing people together and just having that sort of interaction, that as the world becomes more connected in some ways, digitally and such, we're still, we're more connected in that way, but we're less connected in a lot of the face-to-face interaction and a lot of the more human element, I guess. And so that's kind of been what drives me now, is just seeing people enjoy what I'm doing and enjoy what I put together, and seeing new friendships get formed, and new rivalries, and people pushing themselves to become more skilled at these different ways of thinking. It's something that I've found to be very satisfying. And so what started out for me as just a hobby and well, if I want a game like that, I'm going to have to make it, has turned into this is something that I feel is a good creative outlet that also helps bring people together, which I think the world needs more of now.
Uh, my journey, I think, probably had a couple pivotal moments. The first one was certainly my family's always been into games, and I've played games all my life. But when I was younger, got into playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I settled into that dungeon master role. So I love to be the person who created the worlds, created the storyline, and made that fun environment, and really got a special kick out of making those just really fun sessions for everyone. And whenever we kind of drifted away from role playing games into more traditional board games, found things like Settlers of Catan, Ticket to Ride, uh, I wanted to scratch that itch of, someone has to make these games, right? So why can't that be me? And around that same time, I was in college. I'm a mechanical engineer in the background. My master's in mechanical engineering from University of Pittsburgh, and focused on product design development and just making viable commercial products. And around the same time, just looking at all the games around me, being like, well, this is a product. Somebody makes them. some way to get it to the market, and started really seriously inventing it in college. While I was doing some stuff from the product design point of view from my engineering career, started to scratch that itch from a game design point of view as well. Uh, just really got an especially good kick out of it. It's a very like warm, welcoming industry. It's all about getting together and having fun around a table. So it's just a very fulfilling way to create art, create experiences. And once I designed the first game, I was hooked. So just had to keep going from there.
So with the doing these games, what has been one of the challenges about getting the games that you've created? Um, well, okay, couple questions. So one is, how do you like, what has been the challenging thing about getting the games you've created out to other people? And another question is, how do you keep your games from being too complicated in your design process? Because my family, we bounced ideas off of making a game, but then we're like, oh my gosh, this is way too complicated. How are we going to simplify this into a rule thing? And so I guess those are my questions: is how did you get your games out there? Like, what has been the challenge of putting the games out to other people? And how have you managed to keep the rules more or less simplified so that it's not overly complicated? Those are two very different questions, but those were the ones in my head. So,
Yeah. I know for my path, getting the first game signed was definitely the hardest because I'm a freelance designer, so I design the game and then I pitch it to different publishers, and then they're the ones who do the art development and manufacturing for it. So, very much like an author selling a book to Random House or another book, that's the role I play for game design. Um, and whenever you don't have any games and you're known for, you haven't had anything published, that's the hardest part. I feel is trying to get the attention, trying to get the right meetings. It's a lot of networking, a lot of cold calling, things like that. But once you get the first one, if you start to get a good reputation, you can start to build from there. But for me, it was definitely getting that first game signed was the biggest challenge. And then once you actually have something that you could talk about that was hopefully successful, you could start to get in the gate there. Um, the other question you had, the how to make it not as complex. I think we're always still chasing that. I know the biggest thing for me is playtesting and actually having people like videotape them learning your game, and you could see where people are getting hung up on, or whenever you're trying to teach the game yourself into a small like what are people having challenges with? What rules are you having to explain multiple times? Uh, and like a fundamental rule I have is like whenever you're designing your game, no one cares how clever the designer is. Like if you have a really cool rule that you made for your game and it like has just really elegant in its certain way and you feel like it fits the game, if the players don't like it, they don't care how smart you were when you made it. Like it's not creating a fun experience for them. So really focusing on what the players are doing, whether they're having trouble with rules, whether they're getting hung up on different mechanics. It is sometimes very heartbreaking to cut out like large sections of your game. Like there's been plenty of games that had published that don't even come anywhere close to resembling what the first version is because almost everything got cut and then replaced by something else. Um, I know my game, Tiny Epic Galaxies, like it was 100% different. The first version didn't even have dice in it. So, and it is a dice action selection game. So, things change, things get uh, really just through play testing. That's really whenever you make those changes, make things more elegant, and really try to strip out all those extra rules as best you can.
Okay, I can go next for this. I totally agree with Scott. The first one's the hardest. Because but like for us, we went the approach of being self-published. So Binary Cocoa designs, develops, publishes, and usually for a first small batch that we'll make, we'll do a very limited run. We'll even manufacture a lot of the components. Um, and so our struggle is less about finding a publisher, more about all the distribution connections and meeting with stores and all that kind of stuff. It's a different struggle, but very similar. When you talk to the first group and you say, "Hey, I've got this game I've made," um, they'll say, "Well, who else carries it?" You know, and you're like, "Well, no one carries it yet because you're the first ones we've talked to," and so it's really difficult. You know, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem that you have to solve, where you can get more distribution once you have distribution, but once you get through that first hurdle and you kind of break through that, then you can build a reputation and you can leverage that reputation to do things. And so I can certainly echo the sentiment there from Scott that it's tough that first one. Now, as far as rules, for us, it's been really the struggle there is really understanding the what the game is that we're building. Some people like games that are more complex. Other people like games that are simple, and we've tried to make a wide variety of games, but you'll never be able to make one game that appeases everyone, just because everyone has different likes and dislikes and things that they enjoy. And so, what we try to do is really understand what we're making, and then we try to attract those people that are going to be able to test that for us. If someone hates an abstract strategy game, if someone comes to us and we're like, "Hey, you want to help us test a game?" and they say, "Yeah," and we say, "Well, what game do you hate?" and they say, "Chess." The last thing we want to do is necessarily have them play a chess-like sort of thing, because they're not going to enjoy it, and we're not going to get as much useful information from that. But yeah, we go to great lengths to try to find people to test stuff. We invite friends over as soon as our friends have played it and whatnot. We know that they're going to try to be gentle, so then we invite people that we don't know to play it. We'll go to conferences. We'll go to. We even went to the point of opening a local game store that was selling our stuff, but we had a prototype area set up in the front. Because playtesting is so crucial. When you build something yourself and you spend a long time putting it together, you always feel like it's perfect. You always feel like, "Oh, look at this wonderful thing I've made. It's so great. I understand it. The rules must be great," right? As the creator, it's intuitive, right? But the reality is that a lot of times people don't understand what you've built, and if they don't, if you don't have a way to engage them, they won't care about what you've built. It's not because they're mean. It's not because they're rude. It's just people have limited time. They have limited interests, and so we try to really test, and throw out things that aren't going to work quickly, and we throw out far more ideas than we actually finish, just because that's how it is, right? There's only so many hours in the day, but we found that if you can find the right people to test and you can get them to be open about what they think, instead of just saying, "Oh yeah, it's good, I had fun," but really drilling into what they're thinking, and then also observe while they're playing and see what's going on. Be willing to step back and watch people stumble playing your game instead of going, "Oh no, that's not how it works." Then that can really give you meaningful feedback to push forward. And then also getting people that are different experience levels. If you're making a game and you're targeting a younger audience, have those younger people play your games. If you're targeting an older audience, have those people play your games. It's not just about mass testing. It's about having the target, be the ones that are playing, I guess is the best way to say it. Yeah, Brian, do you have anything you want to add to that? You've been doing a whole lot of play testing lately on some new things.
Yeah, I love collaboration. I mean, some of our best, uh, some of the best games have been the input that we've gotten. You try it out, you have your prototype, you sit down, you play it, and somebody says, "Well, have you thought about doing it this way?" And I said, "No, let's try it." And sometimes it works out. It's like perfect. We'll add that in. So the more people we can try it out on, and the more feedback, and some of it, some of the feedback is like, but some of it is pretty good. And so you test it, you test it, you test it. And there's a lot of, and I like having people a part of the whole process. I want them in. It's not just me creating the game, but they're also helping out in creating the game.
So, Lark, we have a backup of questions from our audience.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I was seeing the chat coming up, but I wasn't able to read it. Do you have any that you wanted to read, or shall I find them and read them?
Yeah, no, I got you. So our very first question was, when you say abstract games, what does that mean?
That would be games like, like chess, checkers, geometric board, where you're moving pieces and you're just, there's no really theme to it. They're just pieces and you're just trying to either capture or eliminate or be the last person to move.
Yeah, and usually with an abstract, all the information is on the board. There's nothing really hidden. Everything's very well defined in how it's happening. Like with chess, you don't have a secret piece, right? You've got everything on the board. Your opponent knows the same information you know, and there's no real random to it. So abstracts, there's a lot of people really like them. I'm a fan of abstracts. But some people suffer from what's referred to as analysis paralysis very easily with them, because when you see the whole thing, it can kind of stun a player. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing, and they're trying to analyze all these paths that they can take, and it can be a little overwhelming. But abstracts, yeah, like Brian was saying, it's typically not themed. Well, sometimes they are, but a lot of them aren't themed very strongly, and they are all the information's out on the board, and yeah. But I actually didn't study game design or anything, so abstract might have a totally different definition. But those are the similarities I've seen.
Gamebird says, so for abstract games, the game gives a simpler goal and it's up to the player to figure out how to get to that goal. Also, Gamebird, I see that you're typing. If you want to add to your question, you can also unmute.
Just saying, analysis paralysis happens a lot with me. With like
We all suffer
picking
from
what
that
to
sometimes.
wear.
Well, Scott, is there anything you'd like to add? I haven't seen a lot of abstracts that you've done, and I don't know if you've done many.
I don't
but
think I've probably done that are lightly themed, but not a full abstract yet. But I think one of the hallmarks of an abstract game too is they tend to have like very simple, approachable rule sets, but level of strategy is huge. So it's kind of those minute to learn, lifetime to master type games. I think that can tend to be a hallmark. It's not a firm rule, but I think that's a good hallmark for abstract games.
Yeah, like Go and Othello, those are abstract games, and they have that. Othello has that theme, 5 minutes to learn and a lifetime to master.
Yeah,
same thing with our games.
Yep. Yes, Go. It's a great game. You should. Sorry, I'm reading the comments as they come up here. Gamebird, Go. You should try it out. It's a good game. It'll melt your brain when you get good at it. Yeah.
Sounds like some of the things I know about video games. Complicated stuff happens a lot.
Yeah, a lot of times, like we made a very simple abstract called Straight 4. In fact, Scott, you might have seen this because we were at the same convention, I think, once. You were showing off some of your tiny epic stuff, and we had like this little game that fits in a tube, and there's only 8 pieces. And it's a tiny board, but it's an abstract, and so people learn how to play it in 10 seconds. Right? They know exactly how it works, and we can take an adult or a 8-year-old, sit down, and they'll learn how to play it, and they can play against each other like instantly. But then they start to play it, and the games go from taking 30 seconds to taking 5 minutes to taking 15 minutes because people are starting to figure things out. They're starting to see, oh, there's a lot more to this, and this is deceptive. We think it's simple, but the strategy just kind of exponentially grows out, which can be good or bad depending on what type of game you're trying to make. But yeah, it's one of those. Usually the objectives are simple, like you said, but they can melt your brain. There's some games, like there's an abstract we published that's been starting to pick up popularity called Rue, and I can only play like 3 games of that in a day, and my brain is shot. I'm done. I can't. So playtesting that one was tough because you'd play it and you'd have a good game and you'd enjoy yourself, but I'd be like, okay, I can't go back to another round because my brain is just exhausted from having to think about everything going on. So, yeah.
We
You had a pretty good segue to one of the other chat's questions, which you mentioned you were showing off at a convention. The next question, I think, was about conventions, and are there conventions to show off games? So maybe you could talk about your convention experience and which one it was, and then I can add to it.
Well, I think, have you been to SaltCon?
I've not been to SaltCon. My
SaltCon
Gameland Games
or
has
the
been
Game
to
On Expo? Game On
uh,
Expo in Phoenix, SaltCon.
nope, neither one of those. So SaltCon's very often attended by Gameland Games, who publishes my Tiny Epic games, but I would not have
Oh,
been
maybe
there.
that's what it was. Maybe that's what it was. Okay. Yeah. Well, I didn't see you then, but I saw someone showing off the Tiny Epic series of stuff, probably Gameland then. But yeah, so there's conferences all over the place. In fact, you'll find, this is going to sound weird, but really with any sort of I don't know what it is about I'm going to use my quote fingers, the geekdoms, you've got all of that sort of thing. And I don't mean that in any negative way, because I'm totally a geek, right? The geekdoms, you'll find conferences for them everywhere, right? Like when I started out, I was like, man, I'm a game designer and I'm trying to make these games, and how can I show them off? And then someone was like, well, why don't you go to this conference? And I'm like, oh, well, I'll check that out. And so I go to SaltCon. It's like, oh, yay, it's wonderful. And then, well, now now I'm at SaltCon. While I'm at SaltCon, people are coming up and they say, well, I haven't seen you at the Gem State Gaming Convention or the Salt Lake Gaming Con or I haven't seen you at these. And I'm like, the first year, I'm just like, I didn't know these existed, and it was just kind of a big, neat experience. And now we regularly sponsor SaltCon, we sponsor Icon, we sponsor the Gem State Gaming Con, and we have a lot of fun. Like we go to those and participate. Sometimes we sponsor but don't get to go, just depending on how schedules are. But we go because we get to see this community come together, and it's so neat. It's also really satisfying, for lack of a better word. There's a game we released called Mondrian Color in Motion. It was pretty successful on Kickstarter, and we released it and did our Kickstarter around a SaltCon, and then we came back to the next SaltCon. We came back, and we keep seeing people when they go to these game conventions. They have these carts and they haul their games around behind them, kind of like these little carts, and they're finding people to play their games with, right? And it was so cool to be sitting there, and it made me feel good because I was sitting there and I see our game in people's carts going by, and I'm like, that's cool. We've built something that they enjoy enough that they're taking it with them to a conference to play with their friends and show to their friends. And it's a very satisfying feeling, seeing that. And we'd be demoing a game with someone and seeing people come up and say, oh yeah, there's this. So yeah, conventions, they're all over the place. You'd have a hard time finding a convention that isn't near you, I think. Regardless of state, country, whatever, there's always something going on. And they are well worth going to, not just from a creator standpoint, but also just from a player. It's a lot of fun, and you get to learn new things. So hopefully, sorry, I kind of veered off topic there, but yeah.
It's awesome to hear that you sponsor Solcon, because they have the Ion Game Award, right? That's Solcon, which is a very well-known game design award. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that was one of our just to go back to the game design stuff, the things that help us with game design. Ion Awards, we've submitted some stuff there, and it's really nice when you can submit it. And Ion, they have a lot of like publishers that'll give you feedback on your game. And there's nothing like submitting a game and having publishers tell you everything that's wrong with it, uh, because then you can take it and you can take that feedback and go back into it, and kind of fail forward. Mondrian, the game that I talked about, we were a finalist in it. We made it to the final four, which was awesome. We were thrilled, right? Another game we made that we're getting ready to publish, and we've essentially rebuilt it multiple times, is Sewer Rat. And that one we submitted, and I won't say that it bombed, but we were not a finalist. But we got tons of excellent feedback telling us what sort of things they were seeing as problems, things that our playtesters couldn't catch, things that we didn't catch, but as publishers, they saw them as potential issues. And so conferences, that's another great way of testing. And you're going to find people that really like any type of game. You'll be able to find people that will play everything from abstracts to games where you're just throwing dice to, war games, giant complex war games that take 8 hours to play. You'll find everyone in that gamut there. And so when you're testing, you can stick up a player's wanted sign and attract people. It's like a lightning rod. It's great.
Can I share also, there was that one conference we had in Salt Lake City. One of our games is called Trolls Eat Moles. You have trolls that eat moles, moles that dig holes, and holes that bury the trolls. So it's rock, paper, scissors, but you play it out on a board. And, we had a lot of people come in and we'd have all our games set up. And so I started this one group out and showing them how to play the game, and they were playing and they kept playing it. But I was out busy with some of the other people, some other people showing them how to play. And I came back and they were playing the game differently. They actually added a new rule, and I was watching them and said, wow, you just made that game so much better. Again, this is back to the collaboration, and they were so excited, and I got excited just watching them, how they got into it, and making a game, my game, even better game. And that was exciting. And to see that excitement, like Joseph was saying.
One time we were showing games, and this was part of the why I value sitting back and just watching people play test a lot of times. We had some basic rules written up. I sat down and the group was playtesting, and they knew it was a draft. They knew it wasn't a well polished thing. It was early stages of testing, and there's nothing like writing out your instructions, thinking they are foolproof, giving it to someone, and then finding that they are playing a totally different game than what you envisioned with your instructions. Because everyone's going to interpret things a little differently. And it's neat seeing some of that. And when you're sitting back and you're not telling people what to do, when you're not correcting what they're doing, it can highlight things where you're like, oh, that's a neat deal. And there's some game mechanics that I've been adding to future games. They weren't good fits for those games, but they're good fits for upcoming games where I had never thought about that mechanic until I saw someone misinterpret my rules. And so it's really interesting, kind of the Bob Ross experience, the happy accidents, so to speak, where you're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that happening that way. Won't work for this one, but I could see that being really cool for future stuff. So I'm going to intentionally do that next time, so yeah, it's fun.
So I have a question relating to this for Scott. So, because you guys have mentioned that as you see the games being played at conventions and stuff, you kind of realize how to modify it and change your rules. So for Scott, as you are a freelance game designer who sends your designs to publishers, How does that impact your game design? Do you watch people play it and then you resubmit a new proposal to your publishers, or does that impact your designs at all?
Yeah, good question. So as a freelance game designer, my game has to be pretty well polished before I talk to a publisher about it because they might be expected to do a little bit design and development, but for the most part, it has to be pretty much ready to go. So um, I would do all the iterations, the testing, the changing up versions, and get it to as close to its final form as possible before I submit it to a publisher. Would not have final art. They would do the final art. I would probably have very bad clip art or stuff just to fill in, just to show what the game's like. But yeah. So for the most part, all that work has to be done before you talk to the publisher about it. Um, I'm fortunate enough that I have a couple relationships with publishers now that we can kind of and ahead on things I don't have to be fully done before we can start talking about a game. For example, my Tiny Epic series, we've done 12 Kickstarters together so far. So we collaborate on what do we want our themes to be, what do we want our mechanics to be before I go design the game, then send to them the final version. But for the most part, especially if you're trying to start off as a freelance designer, you have to get all that playtesting done ahead of time. So they don't want to see an idea for a game. They want to see a super fun playable game, and they want to see it as close to their final version as possible.
I have a follow-up question. How do you know when the game is ready to be submitted? Because that's hard.
Yes, and some people say that like whenever people ask to play it again right afterwards, or like, oh, when can I buy that? That's a like really good feedback, which is all good signs. Said I can't say it's a universal rule because if you design a 4-hour game for complex gamers, likely not something they want to play like back to back or anything like that. Uh, it's really a little bit of a sense of your playtesters whenever they're feeling like they're not having a lot of rules issues, they're having fun, they don't feel like something's missing. I think the hardest thing is whenever you have a game that's working well, it's playable, like everyone's able to have a good time, but it's missing that something extra. Like they're not having that real joyous. It's not something they want to like tell their friends about. It's just missing something extra because it's. I feel like that's the hardest one is whenever you get to a game that's okay. Yeah, this is cool. It works as a game. Like it has a couple fun moments, but it's just missing that like way to stand out amongst I'm trying to think at Essen Spiel this year. There's over 1,200 games getting released. That's the big convention in Germany. It happens every year, which is a super fun one to get to. I've only been there once, but it was super fun. Um, but yeah, trying to get that one to stand out. So it's as a designer, it's really hard to actually say when it's. But once you get your sense from your playtesters that they're not giving you tons of suggestions to play the game, they're having fun with it, you're probably on the right track. It also depends on what your own goals are for the game. If it's be very different if you want to be having a commercially viable product, if it's something you want to just design for you and your friends, if it's something that you'd like to get published, but you're okay if it's like a very niche group. All depends on your goals as well. It could be like I have a couple game design buddies who will they have 2 games that they work on. They've been working on it for just uh, like 15 years at this point, and that's just what they love to do is just make this complicated game, continue iterating it. They don't really care if it ever gets published. Not super interested if it does. That's they just like working on the game, and they have this big idea for it. So that was a very long non-answer, but me, I like to rely on my playtesters as much as possible. But would be really curious what Brian and Joseph say too, because they have to make the decision of not only it's ready to go, but they're investing in manufacturing and getting it out there and stuff like that. So that's even bigger commitment for whenever it's done.
Yeah,
We're
and
know,
as
so we're
we
really good at not committing.
just
can I share?
Joseph, as you guys are answering this question, Grey Ghost is particularly interested in the how do you know how to pull it from functional and going through the motions to it has that special edge to it. So
The secret sauce of the game, yes. Brian, do you mind if I take this one?
Go ahead.
Okay, so there's been a few games that we've made that there's that moment where we go, okay, this is ready. One of the most humorous ones. There's a like a cooperative escape the haunted house sort of game that we've been building, and we were invited down to FearCon, which is a Halloween convention. It's not a board game convention, but it's a Halloween convention in Utah. And we said we don't have anything thematic. I mean, we make abstracts. At this point, we did that, and they said, "Well, bring something spooky and just figure something out." And we're like, easier said than done, right? Like this is going to be our first really non-abstract here. Let's see what happens. And so we built this co-op escape the haunted house sort of thing. And yes, Shadow Broom. Lauren's got that. And so we're building that out, and we've been developing it for years now. And we're just getting ready to publish, and we keep adding things. The most recent thing is a graphic novel that has like the backstory of the characters and such, because I guess we like the self-abuse there of trying to put that together. but we're I knew that one was ready for people because I posted on our social media about something totally unrelated. Posted on our social media, and I was like, "Hey, we've got some there was, I forget even what it was. There was some game we were publishing or some event we were running or something like that." And all the comments started coming in, and they were all, "When is Shadow Broom being published? We're wanting Shadow Broom. Can we buy Shadow Broom? Are you going to have it there?" You know? And when we started seeing our community demanding this game be released, then we were like, okay, we're probably got that down pretty well. And we've still refined it a little bit, and we've changed things that we've seen that are broken as we do more testing. But when people are coming to us and saying, "Hey, you need to release this," that's a good indicator. Another good indicator is when we go to a conference and people track us down and they say, "Well, why didn't you bring this prototype? Because all of my friends want to play this." Uh, and so we now like bring it with us wherever we go, because people will be like, "Yeah, I remember that game from last year. Have you guys improved it? Is it ready? Can we play it again?" Or they ask the conference organizer, "Hey, I know the vendor hall's closing, but can we set up our booth to play games with people?" It's less about selling and more about play testing and such. And so we've got the vendor hall going, and people are sitting down in our booth playing the game, and the vendor hall is closing, and they're like, "Well, let me go ask the organizers if we can stay in here as long as we're with you guys, so we can finish this game out." Those sorts of things are really good indicators. As far as our when we're targeting a like a game for kids, when you see them resonating and them bringing their friends and such. So it's really about learning how to gauge the response that you're seeing. And then some games we just we kind of have to hope for the best. Like Mondrian, which ended up being pretty successful. We built that up a bit, but that one we were kind of under the gun because we had built it as kind of a tribute to Piet Mondrian, and he had passed away 70 years prior to us announcing the game, and it was built as kind of a tribute. 70 years, it's a big thing, and so that one we had to get ready. And the most difficult part of that was because the way the card stack and such, and the pieces that you need to pick up, we didn't want to be. We wanted to make the cards more difficult to mess up on the table and whatnot. And so we were testing different materials and different types of pieces, which when you're doing publishing, that really gets expensive quickly. to iterate through pieces and such. But eventually, you just have to say, we think this is as good as we're going to get. Any more fixing will likely break it, and so it's time to put it out in the world. And sometimes it succeeds, and sometimes it doesn't, and you have to learn to be accepting of both outcomes there. So yeah, Brian, is there anything to add there?
I wanted to add the little story for Mondrian. This is a game that I do my own art anyway, and so I like. And it didn't start out to do after the artist. It just happened to be something that it looks like Mondrian's artwork, And so I was so excited. I live down in Arizona, and Joseph lives up in Idaho, and so I said, I've got a game I've got to show you. And so he picks me up at the airport, and he takes me to Olive Garden, and I break it out, and it's just a little package. I mean, it's just like 80 cards and these pieces. And I said, okay, we got to play it. And so we're playing it on in the booth, at the restaurant. And the waitresses were coming over, and they were looking, what are you doing? What are you doing? And just playing the game. And it is a game that's so intuitive, easy to pick up, and the colors. It's all about colors, and I try to tell people it's like dominoes meets checkers. Simple concept, but again, it's another one of those simple to learn, but it just there's so much to it, and it's just whenever I see that excitement and I see people, they're curious and it's different, and it's that we've got a winner there. And I do. I just started last year doing farmers market. And that's a great place to test out the games, because I'm showing people all the time how to play the game, and I know which games are successful. Which ones are going to sell the best. Just by being out there and just playing the games with people. So that's another great avenue. To test your games is do a farmers market.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love all these answers so much. So, Lauren just sent me some questions that we actually had before this panel. We asked the team some questions, and one of them, we also have about 15 minutes before we're at the hour mark of when we started. So one teen asked, I would like to learn more about games that involve bluffing. Those have been some of my favorites, such as Coup. For example, is it easier to format a game where the bluffing revolves around a central mechanic, such as the card synchronization in Coup, or one revolving around a puzzle, such as the whodunit figuring out in Clue? Anything related to that would be awesome to learn about, and I would love to learn how to make a game that involves bluffing, is one of the questions. That made any sense. It's all in the chat if you need to read it.
I've not. I don't think Brian. I don't think we've ever published a bluffing game, right?
Yeah,
we've got one we're working on.
Yeah, Witch's Butter has that person that is not really who they say they are, But that's and it's a little bit of bluffing, but not that much. I know what you're talking about, but
we have very little experience in that. Scott, have you made any grand bluffing games?
It's definitely not like my sweet spot, but I have had a couple. So we just released Tiny Epic Crimes, which does have a clue-like deduction in it, and then did House of Borgia like 8 years ago. Sometimes I don't like doing the math, but yeah, I think it was like 8 years ago, which was a dice bluffing game. I know from my experience designing those games, the hardest thing I think about designing this game is that, especially bluffing, it's such a social thing that it's very hard to see the puzzle on your notebook and see how it actually plays with people. I feel like it's the one that relies most on in-person playtesting, because a lot of games you can get a sense of what a turn might go with, if you're doing some solo testing just to see, oh, this makes sense, you could maybe even start to balance a couple mechanics or resources or things like that. But bluffing, you need other people there. You're not going to bluff yourself. So they're the ones that I feel like are most critical to get in front of people as quickly as possible and start getting their reactions. Um, Certainly, some game types, like for example, I have a couple solo games, and I can do a fair amount of development just on my own table before I start getting them out to my playtester rings and friends and family, and that can help streamline the process. Bluffing games, the longer you take to get it in front of real people who you don't know, it's just going to hurt your process. So it really relies on getting that group together. I think it's in that category of games that sometimes I'm sure Joseph and Brian have the same experience too. Like whenever you're reading rule books as a game designer, you have a pretty good sense of how they play. Bluffing games to me are always like a little bit of a surprise because it just has so much of that table dynamic that comes up that it's just really hard to predict until everyone's playing.
Yeah.
So
And I mean,
I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, there's one that we made called Slamorama, and it's not really bluffing, but it's more of a wits sort of thing, because everyone should know what everyone else has, but you don't know what they're going to play, and so you're trying to convince people that you're going to play something else, you know. But that still doesn't really fit this genre, you know. It's but yeah, I can see even with that didn't really fall squarely in the bluffing area. It's all about, you know, how does the table react, you know, and yeah, I can see that being not just a difficult type of game to design, but very time consuming just because there's so much you've got to do to test the table, so to speak. Yeah.
I saw a note in the chat too, just about it's probably difficult for how much structure you give the players for bluffing and deduction games. These types of games I also think are the most fragile for players, because if you're playing a game and it's a deduction game and someone gives out information they're not supposed to, they potentially ruined the entire game and it like needed to start over. And the same for like a bluffing game, or a hidden role game, that if someone gives out information that they're not supposed to, it's possible they just undid the entire game and there's almost nothing for the players left to do. So it's a fine line to get the right mechanics on that too, where people are able to do the bluffing, the hidden. There's enough social talk because that's where a lot comes from it. But you don't make it very easy to reveal information, or you give them some kind of barriers that it's hard to say break the game and kind of ruin the experience. And I've not designed too many of those myself, but I know that was definitely a challenge for some of them.
Fair points. Let's see. Another question that was asked before this panel. Do you ever make your own fan factions or rules for board games that are already made? If so, tell us about them.
This is actually one of my favorite pieces of advice for people who want to get into board game, is that it's very intimidating to make a game from scratch, to have it work, because it's likely your first game is going to be super bad and no one's going to like playing it. Mine was super bad, no one liked playing it. But if you have some games you really like, a kind of safer space to work in is maybe making a fan expansion or additional characters or an alternate board for a game you already like. Like, for example, I'm not sure if folks are familiar with Ticket to Ride. Like, maybe you make your own Ticket to Ride board to start off. Or I know earlier on I made special player powers for Catan, which is a game that doesn't need player powers. But I created them because I really liked the game and thought it would be fun. But doing some kind of fan work or kind of your own expansions to games that you already know and love and very familiar with, and your friends and family might already love as well. It's a nice way to kind of scratch that itch of game design, see if you like the process, see if you like playtesting without the intimidating arc of starting like ground zero. I liken it to whenever for golfers learning to golf right now, they're recommending that you start on the green, learn to putt well before you start to get all the way to the tee and learn to drive, because it can be very frustrating to get nowhere near the tee right off the bat. So doing something like fan expansions is a real nice way to kind of ease into game.
Yeah. So yeah, I can I totally agree with that. One interesting thing, because we've got equipment to do small scale manufacturing that we've run into, is we've had people come to us with some of their ideas or expansions that they wanted to make, where they're like, "Oh, I made this thing for Catan, and I want to make something that's a little bit nicer because I want to gift it to my family." And we'll help them manufacture, walk them through that manufacturing process and help them make 5 copies to give to their family members and such. Um, and it's kind of a tangent, but there was someone that had found a way to combine all these different games of Catan because I guess their family didn't coordinate and they were gifted like 3 copies of Catan at once. Um, so they were trying to merge it all together and turn it into some super Catan thing, right? And so I remember we helped them make like some little components, and then we made a box for them that was Catan, and it was just kind of funny. But yeah, it's interesting. That's a lot of where I started, where I was like, hey, I've got this. There's this game I enjoy, but I wish it was different, and that's kind of what I cut my teeth on initially. But as I matured as a designer and game developer, it started to be like, oh yeah, this. I'm getting more original. I'm starting to learn what works and what doesn't, and how to conceptualize these things. It's not a board game or card game, but one of the first games I made when I was learning software development was kind of a tribute to Space Invaders. And I thought, Space Invaders is great. You got your little, I don't know if you've all seen Space Invaders, you got your little ship at the bottom, you're shooting up at these aliens that are coming down, right? And I thought, well, what if you miss? Wouldn't the bullet come back down? And so I ended up developing this game that was like Space Invaders, where you could shoot all you want, but your bullets would come back down. You have to dodge your own bullets if you didn't hit. And that would probably be a very direct, fan remake of Space Invaders, right? And it was very much a tribute to that, and I learned so much by going through that. And I didn't think about it at the time, but Scott's totally correct. It was much less intimidating to be like, okay, I'm going to build this game that's a tribute to Space Invaders, and it's 80% the same as Space Invaders, but that last 20% is really going to be different. And that did really alleviate a lot of my stress from being, early development and trying to figure this out. It kind of gave me some guardrails to make it a little bit safer and easier for me to make a game, I guess would be the best way to describe it.
For me, I don't even learn very many games. I don't, Joseph probably can tell you this. I've never played Catan. I've never played a lot of games, and people all the time ask me, do you play this and this? And I say, I don't. But I'll create games. And in some ways, I think that might be good because I'm not borrowing anybody else's ideas. These are just my ideas, but I'm still taking them from somewhere. And I try, for me, I want to be as original as possible. I don't want to borrow other people's ideas. I want to start from scratch and just build. Start with a concept and then build out, and something will grow and evolve. It's like looking at clouds. You look long enough, you'll see, oh, that looks like a dragon, or that looks like a unicorn, or whatever. The same thing with the game. If you start out with just a simple idea and then build it and just start playing with it until something happens. And it's fun because you don't know what's going to happen. And I do the same thing when I'm doing my tessellations, with like MC Escher. I'll start out with geometric shapes, and I'll do, working it until finally it says, that's looking like a dog, or that looks like a jet. And then at that point, when it looks like something, I'll finish it out. And same thing with games. So I'll start out with that. In fact, one game that we created was, I had my own company called Bullseye Graphic Design. I had this bull, logo. And I had all these folders. I said, we could use this for, handing out to sell sheets because I'm not doing that, that design anymore. And so I designed this game around that logo, using circles. And it's just, I think you approach it just, even the way you approach designing the game, come at it at a different angle, and you're going to have ideas that, if you always come at it the same way, you're always going to get pretty much the same result. So take the back door, the side door, take it from aerial or down below, and just let it evolve, and let it just have that idea in your head, and let it go through the gestation period. Let it ferment, and you'd be surprised. You wake up in the middle of the night, got it. Something will happen, and let it. Don't put a time limit on it. Just throw it back there, and something will grow. And sometimes you might be doing 2 or 3 games, and then they merge together, all of them together, to make one game. So,
one of the things, and you just reminded me of this, Brian. I come from like a software development background, and so you've got your game modding, right, where people can do mods. Board games are unique because anyone can make a mod. You don't have to know how to do software development to make a board game mod, right? Anyone can make a mod, and I encourage you to do so. It's a great thing to do, and I know I always like it when people come to me and they're like, "Oh yeah, I got this idea, and I like your game, but I got my copy, and this is how we play it," and they show me what they've done to modify my game. It's kind of fun, seeing that, and knowing that's a neat that's something that they've been creatively inspired to some extent by what I put together, and they've made something totally new that I wouldn't have even thought of, and a totally new way of playing it. And we've asked some people, hey, can we integrate this idea? The best example I can think of is Rue. It was super simple, and I kicked myself for not thinking about this. But it's this really brutal abstract strategy, and I played it with someone, and then they came back and they said, "Okay, now we're going to play it with teams." And I was like, "We never did teams." And they're like, "You don't have teams?" I just assumed that was a way to play it. And they were playing it as teams. And it was just really cool to see that that exploration that they did, and then they discovered it works really well, and that's become my favorite way of playing that game. So yeah, it's really neat. That's something that's really cool about board games and card games and these physical things. You don't have to know or have a background in software development or have a friend that can decide, or whatever, to mod it. And you're welcome to do it. When you purchase it, you've got a physical thing. You can mod it and do that. And I know that myself as a designer and publisher, I'm thrilled when people do that. I don't know how Scott feels about it. Are you okay when people do that, Scott?
Yeah, I think it's always fun to see where they take, because it needs to be fun on their table. So
yeah.
After they get the game, it's theirs to explore.
Yeah. So anyways, that's kind of my perspective to that. Sorry to interject again, but yeah.
No, those were perfect because that actually tied into the last couple of questions that were listed that had been given before the panel was the how do designers find board game ideas, and how does the design process work? And so those answers led into those questions really nicely. I think that's about the time that we gave for this. So we could go over more if you wanted to keep talking about things, but this has been such a fantastic panel. I guess, is there any last thoughts you would want to share about board game design for the teens?
If you feel like making something, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, again, for me, it was starting out with abstract, and it's kind of evolved, into like abstract. But, and which is but it's so fun to see people come together playing against the game. That to me is like the best. Not competing against each other, you're competing against the game. And Joseph, we have this beautiful uh, prototype of Shadowbroom, and just seeing people get excited, and they're cheering, and they're just like, wow, that's like everything that you're trying for. When they're cheering and high five, or just excited that they just beat the game, or even if they lose against the game, that's okay. That they were there. I mean, the moment they were living the moment, playing and challenging the game and working together, and to see how people can coordinate and as a team. Those are good skills to build, and you're doing it through games, and I like that.
Scott, you had
I
looked
think
like
I
you were
would
about to
just,
say something. Oh, sorry. No.
I'd like to add on some of the things Joseph said was just like unlike software design, uh, like no threshold to start making a game. So you don't have to learn you don't have to learn Unity. You don't have to get into any of that. You just need pieces of paper. If even you can mark up dice, it could just be a dice game. But like it, very low threshold for designing. So, and ideas can certainly come from any place. It can come from I love dinosaurs. I want to make a dinosaur game. It could be from I love RPGs, and I think the RPG industry hasn't had enough of this particular type. Like they haven't ever done the right space pirate game. And I'm gonna now step up and do it because all the other ones out there, they're not what I want to see in a space pirate game. Um, whatever reason you want to start designing games are, it's easy to get started and it's a fun activity to do. So it's um, if you're interested, let's get going.
I would love to hear some of the people that are, part of this group. What kind of games do they like to? What kind of games do they like to play, and why?
Gamebird, you were talking about games in chat. Do you wanna unmute? Can you do that?
Yeah, I can unmute. I am alone in my basement room.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I tend to play video games more because those are the ones that my family does a lot because my dad has over 600 video games on Steam. So I've played a bunch of video games. I like different things in video games than board games. I do like some board games. I don't really have enough time to do long-term ones, but I do eventually want to get through a full game of Monopoly because I like strategy. Can be fun. Yeah, I've played Arkham Horror. It is as hard as advertised. I don't remember a whole ton at this moment, but we have a cupboard just full of board games that we should probably start using more soon.
Okay, cool.
So when I've been you just reminded me of this with Arkham Horror. Um, one thing that I've done when I'm running out of ideas is I'll just like start mashing movie titles and random stuff together, and then be like, what would a game like that look like? And I had mentioned this joke. It's a terrible pun, but I'm developing it out into something. I mentioned this before the meeting started, and so Scott's probably going to shake his head and go, why? But I was like, they've got like this Call of Cthulhu thing going on, right? And so I've been working on this concept where you're building a network for eldritch creatures, and you're trying to get them connected with telephony, phone, cell phone, landlines, that kind of stuff. And it's calling Cthulhu because you're trying to get them connected. And so, I guess puns and playing on words can be a fun way to do things, but you will get a lot of people that groan. Um, but sometimes it's just fun to think, if I threw these two things together, these two unexpected things together, um, what sort of game would that be? And that can be kind of a fun way to get things going. There's it's geared around computer games, but there's a game design competition that I mess around with, Ludum Dare. And what they do is they give everyone a theme at the beginning of the competition, and you get either 24 or 48 hours to build a game based around that theme. And it's really interesting to see what people come up with when you're given a theme and not much time to execute on it. People move quickly and they make things. And some of these end up being developed further after the competition into actual games. And that's more of a video game thing, but I've done that same sort of thing. I was helping a high school, and I was teaching like they had me come in and talk about game design and putting stuff together, and it was a whole STEM day sort of thing. And I went in and we ended up doing that as kind of an exercise. It was a multi-day thing, and we said, okay, everyone, come up with a game tonight, and we're going to go over them tomorrow. And it was so neat to see what would happen when you give people a simple idea and then just tell them to make something. No judgment on what's going on. No fear of, oh, that's a bad idea or anything like that. But just, here's a theme, go for it. And it was really cool seeing how that came together and how that built out. So it's a lot of fun doing that. So yeah.
We have
Game jams. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You got the chat. I was gonna make sure you'd seen that. You guys also said you were interested in hearing what games the teens liked. If you go, we have a discussion forum, and there are several posts on there about games. So you guys feel free to explore that, and you can stay here on the server as long as you want and chat with them and stuff if you would like to as well.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Oh, thanks so much for coming.
This has
Thank
been
you.
so fantastic. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. And if you guys ever if you guys think of questions or anything like that, I mean, feel free to reach out. We've got a Discord server as well for Binary Cocoa, and so you're welcome to reach out and say hello and all that fun stuff. So
Sweet.
So yeah.
Joseph, if you
Awesome.
want to throw that link my way, I'll share it so that they can join if they want.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. So, okay. Anything else? Or are we done here? That sounds really ominous.
Dun, dun, dun. I think that's just about it. So thank you again. There was some mentions in the comment that one person, to answer the question of what games they like Betrayal of the House on the Hill because of its horror-themed storytelling, and they don't know who the villain is and who is part of the team at first. So that is a fun game mechanic. So, yeah,
That's
I think
super
that
fun one.
touches on all the various comments and questions. So I think that is everything. So again, thank you for joining us, and this has been such a treat to learn so much about game board design. I've been inspired. So, thank you.
Well, thanks for having us.
All right.
Appreciate
Thank you.
having
It's
us
been
on.
fun.
Thanks.
Okay.
Gonna
Thanks,
pull out
guys.
my old one. Thank you.
All right, have a good night.